The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Ontario has big dreams. More transit, more housing, a spa for all on the shores of Lake Ontario. But if current over-budget and much delayed projects are any indication, getting all that done in a cost-effective way looks like a pipe dream. We'll look for reasons why and solutions tonight. Then, writer Cory Doctorow explains how creative types, including musicians, artists, and writers, can wrestle back control from mega corporations with a little help from their audiences. It's Wednesday, May 24th, and that's next on The Agenda. Major infrastructure projects can literally transform life in a city or a province. But for too many years now, it seemed that if we can get shovels in the ground, nothing gets completed as promised. The O-Train Ottawa LRT, for instance, certainly the Eglinton Crosstown in the provincial capital, and you could broaden that to include refurbishing nuclear or the widening of the 400 highway to Sudbury. Why is that? And given what's on the docket, how can we do better? Let's ask. Shoshana Sachs, Professor of Civil and Mineral Engineering at the University of Toronto and Canada Research Chair in Sustainable Infrastructure. Drew Fagan, Professor at the University of Toronto's Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy and a former Deputy Minister of Infrastructure for the Ontario Government. And Joe Barrage, Urban Planner and Partner at Urban Strategies. And we are delighted to have the three of you around our table tonight for, well, should we have a little fun off the top? Let's do this. Sheldon, let's do this right off the top here. The Eglinton Crosstown's been under construction for more than a decade. Let's look at some things that were built in less time. This list put together by the Toronto Star. For example, did you know Maple Leaf Gardens was built in less than 6 months in 1931? The CN Tower, completed in 1975, took only 3 years to build. The Canadian Pacific Railway, completed in 1885, took 4 years to build. The Roman Colosseum was built in 8 years. The United States put a man on the moon in 8 years. The Panama Canal took 10 years. The 407 Pay Highway was also completed in 10 years. We're on year 12, I think, of the Eglinton LRT. Okay, tell us something. What does, Shoshana, to you first, what does this saga of trying to build this light rail transit line 100 meters north of where we're sitting right now, what does this tell us about our ability to build big things these days?
I think it tells us that we're wishing that it could be cheap and easy and free, and so we're searching for a magic formula that will make hard, expensive things easy to build, and that there isn't a magic formula. Hard, big things are hard, big things, and we're gonna have to build them, and we should be realistic about this. Part of the challenge with Eglinton is that it was the first PPP structure for a transit line in the city.
Public-private partnership.
Public-private partnership, thank you. And we didn't have very much experience with that. We took how we usually did things, run by the TTC, and we decided to do it in a totally new way because we thought it would be better, cheaper, faster. And actually doing things in new and different ways can be harder, slower learning experience. And when we give over a very important public works project to the private sector, we lose some of the control over what happens to it.
The 407 was a hard, big thing, took less time than the Eglinton LRT. Maple Leaf Gardens was a hard, big thing, took less time than the Eglinton LRT. Why can't we do these things anymore?
Well, Maple Leaf Gardens was a building. We actually build buildings better than we do linear infrastructure. Highways we have more experience on than actually transit. We stopped building transit. You know, I looked up Line 1 and Line 2. They each took about 5 years to build, decades to plan, because the politics of it slowed it down. So those two took time in a city that was not nearly developed. What we found with
the young and the blue line,
the young line
70 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Each took about 5 years to build, Line 1 and Line 2. So it's always taken us time to build that. But Shoshana's right that, you know, across Eglinton, in a city that is substantially built, we ran into a bunch of unknown unknowns, right?
Thank you, Donald Rumsfeld.
Thank you, Donald Rumsfeld. And we stopped building transit. Now we're trying to catch up, and it's not easy.
Joe, can you explain it?
I think the other honest reason is there were too many people involved in the construction. So if you look at who's involved in Eglinton, you have the province through Infrastructure Ontario, and then through Metrolinx, and then you have the city involved through the TTC. And I suspect that's one too many people at the party. The trick on successful implementation of big projects seems to be to have your financer, your builder, and your client operator all part of the construction management team. It's not quite clear to me, honestly, what the TTC sort of seem to be half in and half out on this one, and so that always sets up friction, and it always sets up authority without responsibility at the end of a project, which is the worst time for people to do that. So I think there was some real confusion in the structural management of that project, and this is again not atypical. The successful projects, and we can talk about that in a while, are, I think, governments and cities who have managed to organize who's in charge, what are we doing, who's going to run it, who's going to pay for it, get that sorted early, and then construction can proceed more easily. But even then, you're going to run into trouble because of the unknown unknowns.
I want to get Drew on this for a second, because that is, I want to find out if there are too many chefs in the kitchen here, because Infrastructure Ontario, Metrolinx, Toronto Transit Commission, let's not forget about the Ministry of Transportation. The minister is allegedly overseeing this
Ministry
whole thing.
of Infrastructure.
Ministry of Infrastructure. The consortium of 4 companies that is actually building this thing.
The city.
City of Toronto. Okay. Are there too many cooks in the kitchen?
And the feds. The
feds
feds are
put money in too.
largely a funder. They're a silent partner on this project. They will increasingly not become a silent partner because they have a much bigger budget to spend on infrastructure, and they expect to have a bigger say. So we have a very complicated governance, both horizontally in terms of many players within each order of government and vertically among the orders of government. That theoretically should lead to better decisions. It often leads actually to worse. And the other challenge is, if we compare ourselves to other countries, Australia, New Zealand, who are facing the same challenge with regard to building out infrastructure after decades of not doing it, the balance between good politics and good policy is different. The focus on good policy is stronger. It doesn't mean that at the end of the day, the politicians don't make the final decision, but there's an expectation that they defer to experts. And if at the end of the day, they decide that they want to take their own advice and go with a project that may not fit the parameters in terms of cost-benefit analysis of the experts, they have to face public studies that say otherwise. Here, actually, the process is a little too private and the balance isn't quite right.
Do you have a view how we can sort of figure out who should ultimately be calling the shots at the end of the day here?
I think it's a bigger question of who should be calling the shots at the beginning of the day, which is, and there's a question of, did we do the right thing when we changed the way we delivered subways in the city? And I think we didn't, that we should have left subway construction and development with the TTC because they were the experts and had just built the Spadina extension, which was built in 6 years. And so the question is, okay, what do we do going forward? We've already said that the Ontario line, I mean, it's already contracted out as a public-private partnership in the same way of we're going to do something new all over from the beginning. And so we have to be very careful from a government perspective that whoever is in charge, and it's already Metrolinx, so it should keep being Metrolinx, there's no point in completely restructuring the whole situation, is watching the project very carefully. I want to pick up on something Drew said about the politics. Yes, we've been in construction for the Eglinton Crosstown now for 12 years, but we've been talking about the project since the 1960s. And the scale of delay and time and length, the much longer part of it is chatting about it, making reports, saying we're going to build it without coming up with the funding. We need a lot more decision making tied to funding making so that we can get going on the projects. If we could cut out 30 years of the delay from deciding to build it, a couple extra years of construction, we still would have been super early.
Yeah, let me jump on that because it's dead right. When you read the literature on what goes wrong and then try and read the literature on what goes right on transit big projects, speed is a big part of what goes right. If you can build it quickly, you will build it cheaply. Time is absolutely your enemy. So you have Madrid, which is a wonderful example of a big, serious city that keeps building transit. And they deliberately set out to, if they have a long line, they split it up into bits and build all the bits at once and then connect them. So that way they save on inflation costs, which right now have gone completely out of control in construction, it has to be said. That's one of the reasons why I think Eglinton is running into trouble, is the price of everything has added 10, 15%. Right. So if you can control time, you control a lot. The other interesting thing that they do in Madrid is they do good transit, not the best transit.
Right.
And they have this one, the old phrase, the best is the enemy of the good.
What's the difference?
The difference is that there's constant inflation in standards of signaling, of operating vehicles, of technology is ever advancing. And so a lot of people try untested technology. In the Crossrail, which is the big high-speed subway across London, they couldn't figure out how to make the signaling systems work because they were so smart and so sophisticated, they were smarter than the people running them. So Madrid says, we'll wait and make sure that everything's tried and tested, and then we'll somewhere else, and then we'll put it in place. So there's a kind of pragmatism, I think, to these big projects, which is rarely in evidence because everybody wants to be the best and the fastest and
they
the
kept
most modern.
building. They kept building as
Madrid
well. So
did.
for 40 years they built, and they built out in the last 40 years a system as big as our existing system for a city that became in that period a world-class city. We've become a world-class city, but for a long time we didn't build. So Shoshana's point about Eglinton is bang on. We actually started in 1997 and stopped.
Yep.
Right? Stopped, filled the hole back in, and then waited a generation.
And
We didn't.
Yeah.
And that makes
The Bob Rae government started to build the Eglinton line. The Mike Harris government filled in the holes.
And that makes it actually much harder to technically build now. I mean, early in my career, I was involved in the construction of the Spadina extension. And it's harder to build if you don't know what's in the ground, or if it's full of concrete, or if it's full of steel wires from tensioning the original excavation. Building around the part that we filled in made it harder. I think we also need to call it the pandemic here. A lot of projects got slowed down by the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely.
The way that all of our lives got slowed down by the pandemic.
3 years, in effect, of uncertainty and delay and cost inflation.
Yeah. And Infrastructure Ontario, across their package, actually does do a very good job at delivering projects. As Drew said, a lot of things get delivered on time. I could run a list of $500 million transit projects that we've delivered on time with very little fanfare.
It would be worth note.
Yes.
Mention two or three right now, because we certainly never hear about them. We only hear about the disasters.
So the Leslie Street Barns is a $500 million transit project. It was delivered in a couple years, and you probably know absolutely nothing about it.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah.
What's the Leslie Street Barns?
It's a storage yard for managing and working with transit vehicles, which is an absolutely critical part of running a transit system, and absolutely was 100% needed. There's the East Side Rail Yard, also a $500 million project. The Toronto-York Spadina extension was not a perfect project, but it was $3 billion, and it was delivered in 6 years.
Let me give you, I think that completely unsung is GO expansion.
Right.
GO expansion is happening to your hometown wonderfully and beyond to Niagara Falls, and they are tripling the track and they electrifying the track, and this is being done with a very sophisticated public-private partnership. They've actually brought in Deutsche Bahn, the German railroad company, to help manage and operate the system. And the key thing they have done there is that they have Deutsche Bahn as the operator of the system, helping plan the construction of the system that they're going to operate, which is, again, a mistake on Eglinton, which we didn't really do. Those projects are going fantastically well. So they're unsung. Infrastructure Ontario is frankly far more successful than its occasional difficulties suggest.
IO has visitors all the time. From
Infrastructure Ontario.
Infrastructure Ontario, from the States, from elsewhere, looking at the model. I know there's some controversy over the PPP model, but there are plenty of projects that have come in fine. Bigger ones, the Huron-Ontario LRT. has actually done pretty well. And that's a $6 billion project. Mississauga, Brampton.
Waterloo, Kitchener.
Waterloo, Kitchener, the first phase of that.
Yep.
Yeah, Ion came in okay. On the other hand, Ottawa, the LRT in Ottawa, is on the other end of the ledger. But there are plenty of projects that have come in on time, on budget, on scope, or close to.
Let me do an analogy here, and you three tell me whether or not we're facing the same problems with public transit as we did back in the late 1980s with regard to what they then called the Sky Dome. The Sky Dome was supposed to be a covered stadium that was going to cost $25 million. And then, you know, I guess one level of government said, well, it'd be kind of nice to have a hotel there. And then another level of government said, yeah, kind of be nice to have a health club there as well. And then another level of government said, well, kind of nice to have the roof be retractable so you could open it up on a beautiful day. And pretty soon it's $650 million. It's not $25 million. Okay, Joe, start us off here. How much of the difficulties that we face today are because politicians issue a lot of change orders?
It's interesting, not as much as it used to be. I mean, obviously you can imagine that everybody trying to do a big project tries to learn from history, and you start off saying, let's make sure that we get absolutely everything down in the tender package, and there won't be any changes from this. But, you know, to go to what we said before, there are the known knowns, the unknown knowns, and the unknown unknowns, and you try and control for the unknown knowns, which is, for example, right outside the studio here, they discover an underground river, which creates a little chaos for the construction. But then you get the unknown unknowns, which are things like COVID. Nobody could have anticipated that, and whatever construction contract you have will not be able to accommodate something of that uniqueness.
No, they tell you never to turn your back to the camera, but that's Yonge and Eglinton.
Yes.
Like, that's right outside this studio.
Yep.
That shot right there. That's normally one of the most vibrant intersections in the country with lots of traffic, people traffic, car traffic, and it has been a construction site for years.
Yeah.
And, you know, is it ever going to be thus?
Well, it's very worrisome because right now, I mean, I only know what I read on the press, but it doesn't look as if there is any obvious way out of the schmozzle that we're in on.
That's what they've said. There's no credible plan to finish it right now.
Yeah.
Is what they've said. Shoshana, you want to get in?
Yeah, it's a problem, and I don't want to make small how frustrating it is for everybody involved and the people who live nearby and the people who work nearby. But eventually, this project will be done. And
you don't know when, though, do you?
I have absolutely no idea when.
Nobody knows.
And I think they should be a lot more forthcoming about what's going on. I mean, it's not a good look that the only things we know in the public are because part of the construction team broke their contract to talk to the press, right? That implies things are going very wrong with the relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
And also implies that the government is not being forthcoming with the populace about what's going on.
Well, and the consortium is suing Metrolinx right now, which is also not a good look.
Yeah, it's bad, but there's no way to build big projects that are not disruptive. And part of what makes projects slower now is our tolerance for disruption is much, much lower. So you talked about the construction of the original Yonge line. If you look at pictures of what the Yonge construction looked like half a century ago, it's a level of disruption we would not tolerate. The street is completely open. It was built in an open trench a few meters below the surface. That is a much easier way to build than tunneling very deep. And part of the reason we tunnel deep, and this picture doesn't show it, but you keep the streets open and you keep the utilities going. In one of the subway stations I helped build, one of the work I did was I planned the utility relocations. And the number of time you take the water and move it to this side, and then you move it to this side, you move it to that's time and money and effort, but we no longer tolerate that the water be turned off or that the street is closed. And I think as a society, we say that is what we want. We want to minimize disruption. But when we minimize disruption, we make it longer, we make it more expensive, and we make the cheaper, more disruptive ways of building off the table.
Which station?
So I worked on Keele and Caledonia on the Eglinton Crosstown, and I worked on Metropolitan Station and York University Station on the York University Extension.
Right.
Cool. And can you tell us how it's possible? I mean, you've been there at Queen's Park, you've been in those meetings. How is it possible that you could work on a project for 12 years and then have people come out who are affiliated with the project saying, we actually have no credible plan to finish this thing that we've been working on for more than a decade.
It is extraordinary, in part because the players in the private sector responsible for the project are among the best in the country, the biggest and the most experienced in their country. So, but I do want to go back to one point you made, Steve, off the top, which was the Sky Dome example, right? And the degree to which a building, you know, increased in price. The other point you could make about the Sky Dome is, did we build the right kind of project from the start? Was there the foresight that said, right around the time the Sky Dome was built, they built a new stadium in Baltimore, which was actually the new look. The Sky Dome is the last of the 1970s style stadiums, but with a roof, right, or a retractable roof. I'm not sure we built the right thing, even in a.
You know, when the weather's crappy, Drew, you appreciate having the roof.
Right, exactly. Oh, fair enough. But the point about infrastructure is its life is long. Government lives are short. So it's often the case, even if you're at the cabinet table and you believe that your numbers are right, and you believe that the scope is right and the timing is right, that 3 or 4 years later, somebody else is in charge, you know, and you come back for a change. And the truth is the two don't line up, which goes back to the point of the balance between politics and policy and having more independent players have a voice with regard to speaking truth to power.
But can you tell me, I've heard Doug Ford say on numerous occasions now, hey, the Eglinton LRT is not ready, don't look at us. We didn't let this contract in the first place. This was the previous government.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been premier for 5 years. Is that an excuse that still holds water?
So he's been in power for 5 years. The Wynne government was in power for 5 years, right? So he's in charge. And yes, there's plenty of fault to go along, including those unknown unknowns, right? Nobody could have made this perfect. But he's as accountable now as anybody else. And it's unfair to look back at the others and sort of point fingers. He's the one pointing fingers. Now, the other point is in that balance between politics and policy, you see a heavy hand of the political level in terms of trying to quiet the controversy from minister's office towards those agencies who are actually trying to get things done. Even now, 12 years in, the balance isn't perfect by any means.
How much, Joe, pick up on this if you would, how much of the problem is more logistical than political in as much as, do we have enough skilled trade workers who can build these things, et cetera?
I mean, I actually do think that obviously people are fascinated by the political oversight of this and endlessly searching for the villain. I think the logistical issues are of an order. There aren't that many construction companies that can actually do this kind of work. There aren't that many tunnel boring machines, you know, that you can actually call on site that quickly. And I think that we have we're very reliant in this country still on European expertise, particularly Spanish and German, other construction countries who have got a bit more technology and a bit more skill than we have. It's part of the reason for this is because we have this terrible stop and start of building big projects. If we were able to just add a mile each year, a kilometer of this, a kilometer of that to the LRT, to the subway, we would keep that skilled crew knowledgeable, and we would be able to cost things better. But if we have to pick up a new team every time and play a new game on a new pitch, which is really what we're doing each time, it's not surprising that it goes wrong. So if you like, if mega political oversight is at fault, it's for not having a continuous, fluid extension of the system. This is where GO, Infrastructure Ontario Running GO, has got it right. They are basically adding kilometre after kilometre after kilometre to the GO system. They're tripling the tracks, they're electrifying, and they're doing it as an endless rollout. And this way they can do it inexpensively.
Shoshana, pick up on this. There are, I think, a relatively small handful of companies who have the expertise and experience to build these kind of projects. And if they get in trouble, it's not like we can just go down the yellow pages and pick the next ones down on the list to say, well, these guys can't do it, you come on in here and finish off this job. How much of that explains why these things get overrun and delayed?
You can get help. Especially if you have consistency of work, the market will respond to it. If there's going to be work, people will be around. Most of the big engineering firms who would come in and do the design can call in help from other countries. And the people who have expertise in tunneling or subway construction, they tend to go around the world. It's, the very similar people were involved in Eglinton as were involved in New York projects or Madrid projects or even Crossrail in London. It's not that big of a world. So they could get help if they want it. I think where the pinch is coming is more on the people who are physically building the stations with their hands. We don't have the same availability of construction workers. And also, since we've been playing catch up for so long, we had about 20 years of not building infrastructure. There's a lot of demand going into the system at the same time, not that many construction workers. And whereas a generation or two generations ago, we would have had an immigration system that had doors open for people in the trades or construction workers. We don't have that as much anymore.
It's a great point. We don't have enough skilled tradespeople. We've seen this coming for a long time, and the Ford government deserves a lot of credit for focusing on that, both with regard to taking initiatives to increase the perceived, acceptability, the perceived legitimacy or whatever of skilled tradespeople themselves, and we need to think as well about the immigration system and encouraging that, because right now the immigration system doesn't actually encourage people with those kind of skills. So there's a crunch right now, and we don't think about it enough, but the Ford government deserves credit on that scale.
And the engineering community deserve credit because they have just relaxed the credential requirements for foreign trained engineers. So I think there are good things which are happening, but it does reveal the deficits that you create if you go stop, start, stop, start, stop, start.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a few minutes left here. Let's get some ideas on the table. I know clearly you can't just walk in there and say, I'm in charge, here's what we're going to do. But if you could, how would you bring this thing to completion?
I can't comment on Eglinton because we don't have enough public information about what is going on. But I can talk about the next project. The number one thing we need is consistent funding for transit that comes over time. And when we know what the consistent funding is going to be, if it's going to be $500 million a year or $2 billion a year, like Metrolinx always said we needed, then we can say this is how much we're going to have, and we can plan for it consistently over time. The stop and start, we don't know where the money is. We have 1 million more projects than we have funding, is a huge part of the problem of we can't do things consistently. We can't keep the skills that we need here. We can't plan for the future. So I'd sort out the funding first thing.
Joe.
Second thing, I would absolutely insist that the operator of the transit system be part of the construction management team. So that you don't have an outside user of this system complaining that it isn't the way that they want it to be. They should have been inside the tent right from the beginning and be part of managing the construction so it comes out the way they want it.
So in other words, the Toronto Transit Commission should have been there on day one in the inside.
Or potentially bigger picture, but for others to decide. It could be that the days of the Toronto Transit Commission are over.
I can't disagree with that more.
No. I mean, the city is broke, totally broke. The city cannot afford to run a transit system of this sophistication, I suspect.
I can't disagree with that more.
That's a different show. Okay, we'll come back and talk about that. Okay, what can we do now?
Get the politics and the policy in the right place right from the start so you don't have original sin at the beginning. That's point number one. The other thing with regard to transit, which I think is going to be done better on the Ontario line, and we can see that starting, is we're going to be thinking more three-dimensionally in terms of the benefit of transit-oriented communities, thinking more about the housing and the services that should be focused in at nubs at those stations. We didn't even do enough of that on Eglinton. I think we will on the Ontario line.
We gave up a lot of it on Eglinton. It was in some of the plans at the beginning that was dropped. I think one thing that we do criminally is we forget what we used to be good at. Toronto and Ontario were world leaders in transit-oriented development in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Bill Davis was Transit Man of the Year in the 1970s.
Yeah.
And right here, this building being the testament to that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, this building is built near a new transit station. It gives destinations and activity to the transit. That was done on purpose all the way up and down Yonge. We were world leaders in that, or certainly North American leaders. A lot of what we need to remember is just what we used to be good at.
Well, that's an idea. We did build the Royal Ontario Museum, the Art Gallery of Ontario, the Science Centre. I mean, Ontario Place, these were things we knew how to build. Most of them still stand the test of time today. Can we learn anything from that to apply to today?
It's interesting to go back to that period because that's still perceived as the golden age of infrastructure developments when modern Canada, modern Ontario truly was built. We're spending as much now as we were then in real terms. For the first time since then, the fundamental point is I think it's fairly accepted that we're not getting as much value out of it now as we did then. It's a lot more challenging now than it was then.
I'm going to order the three of you to leave the studio, go out to Yonge and Eglinton, and just sort of give them a pep talk to finish it up, okay?
Will do.
How we can finish this off? That's Drew Fagan from the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the U of T, and on the other side of the table, Shoshana Sachs from the University of Toronto as well. She, the professor of civil and mineral engineering there, and Joe Barrage, the urban planner from Urban Strategies. Great discussion, everybody. Thanks for coming in at TVO tonight.
Thank you.
It has never been easy to make a living as a writer, musician, or artist. And while technology now makes it possible to find global audiences for all manner of creatives, that's a mixed blessing at best, according to a new book co-authored by Cory Doctorow. It's called Chokepoint Capitalism: How Big Tech and Big Content Captured Creative Labor Markets and How We'll Win Them Back. He's also the author of a just-released novel called Red Team Blues. And here's Cory Doctorow back in our studio tonight. Great to see you again.
Nice to see you too, Steve.
Is it kind of okay to come back to your hometown?
I love coming back to Toronto, although, you know, I've had this fast-forward vision of it for the last 25 years, so I only get it like in these flashbulb moments. And it does have that weird dream logic of like being home, but all the furniture is in the wrong place.
Right on.
Yeah.
You feel at home in California?
You will never feel as at home as you do in the city you grew up in.
Okay.
It's home, but it's not home the way Toronto will be. And I don't think any place ever will be.
Good.
Yeah.
Let's start with a nice tight question. Culture, you say, has been captured. How so?
Yeah, so my co-author Rebecca Giblin and I, we set out to investigate this question. How is it that copyright now lasts longer, covers more works, has stiffer penalties? Those penalties are easier to get. The entertainment industry is larger and more profitable than it's ever been, and the share of money going to creators is lower than it's ever been, and it's been in decline for 40 years and continues to get lower. And our conclusion was that because the way that we expect creators to wring a living from the intermediaries that bring our work to market, be they TV networks or publishers or what have you, is through copyright, a right they bargain away. And since we bargain with 5 publishers, 4 studios, 3 labels, 2 ad tech companies, and 1 company that controls all the ebooks and all the audiobooks in the world, that adding more copyright doesn't help for the same reason that like giving your bullied kid extra lunch money won't help. There isn't an amount of copyright that you give to creators that will leave enough behind when they enter into these lopsided negotiations for them to earn a living off of. And indeed, if we're just transferring these rights to large monopolized firms, then it cements their dominance and makes them harder to bargain with. And so we devote this book to figuring out how to unrig these markets.
Has it not ever been thus?
No, it really hasn't. You know, 40 years ago, we took this decision as a society all around the world in the kind of Reagan, Mulroney, Thatcher era to change the way we enforce competition law and to say that so long as prices are going down, any kind of merger, any kind of predatory conduct is permissible. And another way of saying prices are going down is saying suppliers are being paid less. That's one of the ways that you can bring prices down. And so what we've seen is this orgy of mergers that produced a kind of durable dominance for these extremely large firms that can really put the squeeze on their suppliers. And, you know, the creators are among those suppliers who are feeling the squeeze. We're not the only ones, obviously. There's nurses and there's farmers and there's all kinds of people who feed into these choke-pointed markets where there's one giant firm that sits at the neck of a very tightly controlled market with buyers on one side and sellers on the other, and them just reaping the rewards in the middle. But, you know, creators are especially vulnerable in part because we would do it even if you didn't pay us. It makes us pretty easy to exploit. And also because there are so many people who want to do it. And so there's always someone that you can bring in to replace a creator who demands too much.
So the model that you just described is the choke point capitalism you decry.
Yeah, it's the hourglass-shaped market with customers locked in on one side, creators locked in on the other, and the firm in the middle extracting as much as they can, making things worse for both sides.
I will play devil's advocate here and say, yes, but hasn't Amazon enabled people to get their wares into far more places than they might otherwise have done so, and sold more than they might otherwise have done so as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think that part's fine. And, you know, this is a kind of sleight of hand that lots of people who are doing bad things like to play. They say, well, what if, or they say like, well, you don't like the fact that Amazon has drivers who have to relieve themselves in bottles behind the wheel, and that it maims all these workers in the warehouse, and that it exploits all of its suppliers and is ruining Main Street. But you do like getting your deliveries cheaply, and you do like having all this convenience of having many items. And it's as though you couldn't have one without the other, right? Like people say, oh, you like searching the web, but you don't like being spied on. I just don't think that a bearded prophet came down off a mountain with 2 stone tablets and said, Larry, Sergey, stop rotating your log files and start mining them for actionable market intelligence, right? It is entirely possible to imagine a world in which Amazon drivers are fairly compensated. No one dies in an Amazon warehouse. Suppliers get a fair share of the deal, and we can search the web and find the things that we want without being spied on, all without maybe producing the surpluses that allow Jeff Bezos to buy a comical penis rocket.
I never thought of it that way before, but would stuff be as cheap if we did all the things you just listed?
Well, I guess it depends on whether you care about what the price is or how much you can afford is. Because if the price goes down but your wages go down too, then the price isn't the most important thing. And what we've seen is a steady erosion of the buying power of working people as we've been chasing lower prices, because, of course, lower prices come from suppressing wages. And so while there's a small number of people who are better off because they reaped the rewards of suppressed wages, the actual people who work for a living, that is to say the people who depend on wages, have not seen their buying power go up. They've seen their buying power stay static or decline, and we've seen a lot of debt-fueled growth, which is now reaching a crisis point. I just, again, think that we could have more stuff, better stuff, without having to endure this kind of agony that has been visited upon working people of all kinds.
It's interesting that 100 years ago, Henry Ford understood that he had to pay a good wage to the people who made his cars, enough for them to be able to afford to buy one, or else he understood that he had a problem. We don't seem to know that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's neoliberalism in a nutshell, right? It's this idea that we can chase global markets for labor and for consumers, and that we don't really need to ensure that labor is the consumer anymore. And it was to our great detriment. I mean, I think we have seen a collapse of many of our institutions as a result. And I think that we have also seen a collapse in our resilience. And we saw this during the pandemic when long supply chains stretched and then shattered because we had chased these alleged efficiencies to the ends of the earth.
Let's do a quote here. This is from Chokepoint Capitalism, where you write, "Billions in profits flow to companies like Google, Amazon, and Apple every year off the backs of creative workers. We can't understand their dominance without understanding how they came to achieve it." Okay, so let's do that. How has Amazon created choke points for the publishing industry?
Sure. So publishing is actually a really good example of how Amazon did it. So Amazon went to the public with an offer. They said, we will sell you books below cost. We'll offer very deep subsidies. We'll offer free returns. We'll offer subsidized shipping. And people piled in and bought lots of books. This made Amazon into what's called a monopsonist. So monopsony is a closely related idea to monopoly. A monopoly is a powerful seller. A monopsonist is a powerful buyer. The term monopsony is not widely understood because we don't have a family-destroying board game with that name, but it's actually a much more important concept. Monopsony tips, is what economists say when a firm gains market power and can start setting its own prices. A monopsony tips at much lower market concentration than monopoly. There are a lot of consumers who are willing to shop in one place instead of another if the price is better. But there aren't a lot of businesses that can afford to have, say, 10 or 15% of their market disappear overnight. And so once a single buyer controls 15% of a market, then they have an enormous amount of leverage over how goods in that market are priced. So Amazon gained that leverage. They locked in lots of customers. So they sold customers shipping below cost. So if you prepay for a year's shipping, you're not going to shop anywhere else unless you can't get what you want from the company that you've already paid for shipping with.
Yep.
And so Prime customers, 90% of their searches start on Amazon and end on Amazon. So they lock people in with shipping. They lock them in with subscriptions to their electronic books and electronic audiobooks. If you've already bought a book a month, if you've already bought an audiobook every month, you're never going to shop anywhere else. And then they lock them in with technical protection measures. So all of the audiobooks sold on Amazon through their Audible platform, which is the 90% monopolist of audiobooks around the world, and nearly all the ebooks they sell come locked to the platform with something called digital rights management. And ever since James Moore and Tony Clement amended the Canadian Copyright Act, it has been a crime to remove digital rights management, even if no copyright infringement takes place. So this means that if I, as the author, want to give you, my reader, a tool to let you remove the ebook of mine that you've bought from the Amazon app and put it in another app so you can break up with Amazon, I commit a crime. In the United States, that crime under Section 1201 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act is punishable by a 5-year prison sentence and a $500,000 fine, which is a much stiffer sentence than you would get for merely stealing the book. Right? So the author giving you the ability to take your books elsewhere is more criminalized than copyright infringement. So you get the audience locked in. They can't take their books elsewhere. They've prepaid for their books. They've prepaid for their audiobooks. They've prepaid for their shipping. They're habituated to shopping there. The actual bookselling market, brick and mortar bookselling market, is in decline because Amazon's selling below cost. They're using access to the capital markets. So one of the things we used to do is ban predatory pricing, where you sell below cost in order to capture a market. We stopped enforcing that law. Now it's everywhere, right? This is how firms capture markets all the time. It's how Uber blew $32 billion of Saudi royal money capturing the taxi market and so on. And so you get all the customers who now only buy their books on Amazon and only can buy their books on Amazon because their libraries are all locked to Amazon. So any new books they buy elsewhere, they can't keep with the rest of their books, right? Now they go to the publishers and they start demanding unsustainable discounts because that subsidy has to end. So Amazon had a program they called Project Gazelle. It was a program to seek out vulnerable mid-tier publishers. So the mid-sized publishers who brought us all the really interesting stuff that didn't come from what was then the big 6 publishers and now the big 5. And it was called Project Gazelle because the bargaining agents on behalf of Amazon, the project managers, were exhorted to imagine themselves as cheetahs hunting down the sickly gazelle in the pack. The only thing about this that Amazon's lawyers objected to was the name, right? So there were companies that tried to opt out of this. Melville House said, okay, we're just not going to give you this discount because we'll go broke if we do. And they said, fine, we're taking the buy button off of every Melville House title. It was only 10% of Melville House's sales, but they didn't have 10% slack in their market. They had to come back to Amazon and offer those unsustainable discounts and die a slow death instead of a quick one. Now they're part of a big publisher. They had to sell out in order to get there. One of the things about monopolies is it breeds monopoly, right? You can't negotiate as an independent, so you merge to monopoly, merge to monopoly, merge to monopoly. So now we have writers on the one hand who are independents selling direct on Amazon through the Kindle and Audible program. They're getting a really rotten deal. That deal keeps getting worse. There's a scandal called Audiblegate we detail in the book where over $100 million was stolen from Audible independent authors using an accounting trick. You have publishers who've become highly concentrated. They're giving unsustainable discounts to Amazon still to this day, but because they've also become highly concentrated, they're putting the squeeze to writers. Right? So there are fewer places that you can sell your books than ever. And so those writers are getting a worse deal as well. And then, prices on Amazon are going up because once they've captured the market, they don't have to keep the prices as low as they used to. One of the ways that gets disguised is Amazon binds its suppliers to something called the most favored nation deal, which means that if you raise your prices on Amazon, you have to raise them everywhere else. Amazon has to be the lowest price you offer or match the lowest price you offer. More than 50 cents of every dollar that Amazon brings in for those independent sellers, Amazon keeps in the form of junk fees, search fees, commissions, fulfillment fees, and so on. Businesses don't have 50% margins. So the only way they can sell on Amazon is to jack their prices up. But then they go and they jack their prices up at Canadian Tire, Target, and everywhere else because of that most favored nation deal, which means that wherever you shop, you pay more because Amazon is squeezing its suppliers in this way. So this is bad for audiences, it's bad for publishers, and it's really bad for creative workers.
And presumably the United States government knows this and could do something about it should they want to. Why don't they?
Well, we have 40 years of bad precedent going the wrong way, but that's shifting. It's shifting in part to some really great Biden appointees. I'm not the world's biggest Biden fan, not because he's not radical enough, or too radical for me, he's not radical enough for me, but his antitrust appointments are without compare in the field. So you have Lena Khan running the Federal Trade Commission, who is really taking big tech firms to the woodshed, as well as big entertainment companies. You have the Department of Justice Antitrust Division run by Jonathan Cantor, who's doing amazing work. And until very recently, you had a Canadian, Tim Wu, running the White House Antitrust Office inside. He was their tech antitrust czar, who conceived of a whole of government approach, where they went through the statutory instruments for each of the departments, what we'd call a ministry here, and found all the different ways that the Agriculture Department, the Transportation Department, and so on could all do their bit to deconsolidate corporate power. And all of them are doing this stuff. They issued a memo in 2020 in July with 72 action items and a timeline for hitting them. They've hit every one of them. So it's going well.
Okay. We did Amazon and what that's doing to authors. How about Spotify and what that does to musicians?
Oh my
Has it
gosh.
created a choke point?
Oh, yeah.
Similarly.
Yeah, Spotify, so it's interesting because, you know, one of the claims that has been made is that tech is exceptional. And one of the ways that people claim tech is exceptional is that it's exceptionally wicked. That unlike the entertainment industry, tech is very bad for creators, where the entertainment industry is very good. This is a very short-sighted and really amnesiac argument. I mean, it's the recording industry that decided that the Beatles would get 1 penny per LP to split 4 ways, minus 15% held back for breakage and promotion, right? That wasn't the tech sector that did that. And so, you know, there are some companies out there that bring music to the public that have extraordinarily bad deals for musicians. One of them is YouTube, which is part of Google. It's the tech sector. But there are others that have equally bad arrangements that are creatures of the entertainment industry, like Spotify. So when Spotify started, it needed to have catalog. It needed to have all the music. Now, 70% of the recorded music is controlled by 3 companies, Sony, Warner, and Universal. They didn't invest in that music. They just gobbled up the companies that did, bought them at fire sale prices in the 90s and 2000s during various financial crises. And so this has given them 70% of the music catalog and 65% of the publishing rights. They're an oligopsony and an oligopoly, but they're monopolists, right? They control the industry. So Spotify goes to the big 3 and they say, what's it going to take to get a license to your catalog? And they go, well, this is very straightforward. You just have to make us your equity partners. We're going to be in business with you. And so now they have an irreconcilable conflict of interest, because every dollar that the record industry takes out of Spotify in the form of a royalty is a dollar that they can't take out in the form of a dividend. And the royalties are monies that they have to split with their creative workforce. And the dividends are theirs to divvy up as they choose to. They could give none of it to the artist, some of it to the artist, some to some artists. No one has a legal claim on it. It's down to their largesse as to who gets this money. And so they immediately negotiate a rock bottom per stream rate for Spotify. We all have heard how low the fees are for Spotify. What we don't hear so often is that Sony, Universal, and Warner insisted on it. And they got most favored nation status. So the 30% of music that they don't control all had to sell to Spotify on the same terms. But they negotiated minimum monthly payments for themselves. So say Warner is entitled to, say, $10 million a month, and say all the streams from Warner played on Spotify this month only add up to $5 million. They still get $10 million. The other $5 million is an unattributable royalty, and again, that's theirs to use as they see fit. So they also bargain to be freely included in playlists. If there's playlists you like, you should know that a substantial fraction of that playlist is payola. It's money people are paying to be included in that. Except the big 3 get included for free. They also got free advertising, free marketing, and so on. On the eve of Spotify's IPO, when they went public and those shares that the record companies were holding blew up, their standard deal expired. They had to negotiate a new deal with Spotify. And in theory, they had Spotify over a barrel, because that IPO would have failed without a deal with the big 3. They didn't bargain for a higher rate. They bargained for a lower rate.
Why would they do that?
Because then the shares would be worth more on the eve of the IPO. And so they got more billions from bargaining for a lower rate. And because of most favored nation, the other 30% of music that the big 3 don't control also took a haircut on the eve of the IPO, but they didn't have any shares. So that's how Spotify rigged the music market. And the fact that this is not substantially worse, although it has different contours to YouTube, tells you that it actually doesn't matter whether it's the tech sector or the entertainment sector. You know, we sometimes say if you're not paying for the product, you're the product, and then people buy like an iPhone and they discover they can't get it fixed at the shop they want. They have to pay Apple over the odds to get it fixed, and they realize they're still the product. You don't bribe companies into treating you as a product. Companies have to be terrified into treating you as not the product by competition and regulation. Those are the two things that regulate and discipline their conduct towards you. Giving them money will not conjure up the respect that you're due. And, you know, by the same token, it doesn't matter if the person who runs the firm that mediates between audiences and creators, runs that choke point, identifies as an entertainment executive or a tech executive. They're going to squeeze you for all they think they can get.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, you're going to have to explain to me why we would be under any impression at all that things will ever change, because writers have to write.
Yeah.
Musicians have to write and sing music. You know, every movie maker's got to make movies.
Yeah.
If you look at where the strengths and weaknesses of this system are,
Sure.
you got to do what you got to do.
So you're describing something called vocational awe. And it's something that afflicts not just creators, but also nurses, doctors, teachers, people who take care of little kids, people who take care of the elderly. And it does make us uniquely exploitable. And yet, we have seen in Ontario very recently how nurses and teachers can come together to resist that kind of control. And where I live now in Burbank, California, every street has got a picket line on it because the writers are on strike.
Yep.
And they're about to be joined by the directors and the actors. So the second half of the book, I have to say, the first half of the book just unwinds these accounting scams. There's actually a technical term for it from finance, MIGO, my eyes glaze over. It's when you make these Baroque scams that are just like, you're supposed to bounce off of them. So we unwind them, you know, pick them apart, show you that there's nothing in the middle of them except a fraud. But the second half of the book addresses itself to solutions. And it's important to note that because we hear from lots of readers who, by the time they get to the end of the first half of the book, they're hearing this alarming high-pitched sound that they think is like an incipient rage aneurysm, and they want to put the book down. But the second half of the book is like what we can do. And look, anything that can't go on forever eventually stops, right? And as we lurch from crisis to crisis in the entertainment industry, which is full of things that can't go on forever, because we don't have any good ideas lying around, we just grab onto the same bad ideas and try them harder. Maybe if we just make copyright last longer, cover more kinds of works, have stiffer penalties, we will eventually figure out how to solve this problem. And all we're doing is making these 3 labels, 4 studios, 5 publishers, 2 ad tech companies more strong, right? So instead, we address ourselves to really practical things, shovel-ready ideas that can be enacted as law, as antitrust remedies. So these companies are racking up all kinds of offenses that will someday come to a potential settlement, right? Where these firms will say, I don't want to risk what just happened to Facebook in Europe, a 1.2 billion euro fine. I'd like a settlement. What conduct remedies can I adopt that would get me shut of this action? We're devising those as well. And I can give you an example of one if you'd like. So everyone who signs a contract that generates a royalty, typically that contract allows them to audit the royalty statements. And when you audit those royalty statements, you often find discrepancies. And for reasons we can't possibly hazard a guess at, those discrepancies are almost always in the favor of the publisher, the label, or the studio.
I'm shocked.
And not the creator. We actually cite one company in LA that does tens of thousands of record label audits. They've done it for decades. In every instance except one, the errors that they found were in the favor of the label and not the artist. I assume this is some kind of very vexing, localized probability storm that just makes things very hard for the CPAs of the labels, and they have my sympathy. So when you say, hey, you stole my money, I'd like it back, they say, you're mistaken. Artists are adorable, but you can't do math. We don't owe you anything, and you can't afford to sue us, but tell you what, we're such good-natured slobs. How about we give you 50 cents on the dollar, and all you need to do is sign this non-disclosure agreement. So you can't tell anyone else how we hid the money we stole from you and how we might be hiding the money that they stole from them.
So they still make 50 cents on the dollar they weren't entitled to.
And nobody finds out about it.
And no one finds out.
No one finds out about it. So those non-disclosures are very vexatious. And the non-disclosure usually also comes with the requirement that the accountant who did the audit never audit that label again, right? Like, this is like telling the forensic specialist, dig anywhere you'd like in my garden, fellas, but not that corner. I'm very sentimental about it. Let me know if you find my wife, though, right? So contract law is a matter of state law. And all of these contracts are settled in 4 states, New York and California, obviously, Washington State, where the game studios and Amazon are, and Tennessee, where Nashville is. If we were to amend one or more of those state laws, and amending state law is easier than federal law regulation, to say that as a matter of public policy, non-disclosure can't be enforced where it pertains to material omissions or misstatements in royalty statements that harmed someone due a creative wage, then at the stroke of a pen, we put more money in the pockets of more artists than 40 years of copyright term extensions combined, right? This is a crack in the machine. You stick a lever in it, you wiggle it around, money pours out of it into artists' pockets.
Can it be done?
Absolutely, right? Because there are scandals about this all the time. Well, so the next time there's a scandal about this, instead of merely extracting a fine from these companies, why don't we use it as the political opportunity to amend state law?
Who's the we? Who has to make it happen?
Well, the people who get angry when artists get screwed. I mean, think about what's happening with AI right now. People are very rightfully worried that our bosses want to fire our asses and replace us with software, right? They have motive, means, and opportunity to do it. There are a lot of proposals for what to do with it. I think that the one where we give people the right to decide who can study their work is probably not going to work out for us. I think it's going to be like when we gave artists the right to control who could sample them, and immediately the label said, fine, to sign up with us, you have to give us your sampling rights. And now if you want to sample, you pay a label, the label keeps the money, no other artist gets it, and you, the artist who's sampling, is poorer, everyone's worse off. It's probably not the answer we want, but there are other possible answers. And right now, it seems pretty likely that something's going to happen about so-called AI. It's not artificial, it's not intelligent, but something is going to happen because there is a real public sentiment among creators and among their audiences that this is inequitable.
You are a great storyteller, I've got to say, both in fiction and nonfiction.
Thank you.
So we are happy to remind people, Red Team Blues is the novel, and Chokepoint Capitalism. How big tech and big content captured creative labor markets and how we'll win them back. Cory, always good to see you here in our studio. Thank you.
Nice to see you too, Steve. Thank you.
And that is the agenda for Wednesday, May 24th, 2023. Tomorrow, we're live at the Isabel Bader Theatre at Victoria University at the University of Toronto, starting at 7 p.m. In partnership with the Toronto Region Board of Trade, TVO Today Live is hosting a debate with 6 of the leading candidates competing to be the next mayor of Toronto. The agenda will have post-debate reaction starting later than usual at 8:25 p.m., also live from the debate stage. And we hope you can join us for all of that. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you tomorrow night for the Toronto Mayor's Debate.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.